For the last 15 years or so, Oregon has consistently been one of the best teams in college football. They've competed for Rose Bowls, national championships, they've sent tens of players to the NFL draft, and they've had their first Heisman Trophy winner. Now, looking back at all these great seasons they've had, it's kind of really difficult to determine which team was their best. But what if I were to tell you that their best team was a team that won only 9 games and went to the Sun Bowl? That very well might be the case. The 2007 Oregon Ducks only won 9 games, but in the middle of November, they were one of the favorites to win the national championship. So what exactly happened? On November 15th, 2007, the number 2 Oregon Ducks had a road game in Tucson to play the Arizona Wildcats. Now, with a very favorable schedule to close out the 2007 season, it was likely if Oregon just won out, they'd be in the national championship. They were also led by quarterback Dennis Dixon, who at the time was one of the Heisman frontrunners. With him at the helm, Oregon looked pretty much unstoppable. And then within a matter of seconds, Dennis Dixon's Heisman chances were shot, and so were Oregon's national championship hopes. Dennis Dixon tore his ACL. Season over. They lost that night to Arizona, and they lost the final 2 games of the season after that. On November 15th, Oregon was ranked number 2 in the country, and just a few weeks later, they were unranked. It was a nightmare finish to the season for Oregon. But what if Dennis Dixon never tore his ACL and never got hurt? Would he have won the Heisman? Or would the Oregon Ducks have been the 2007 national champions? Before we get to the video, I'm just going to ask you guys a quick question. What is your favorite college football team? I'll give you a quick second to think about it. Alright, if you came up with an answer, that probably means you're a college football fan, which means this is the perfect channel for you. If you're brand new to my channel, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is definitely the place for you if you love college football. And make sure you turn on those notifications so you never miss a video. The Oregon Ducks were coming off an extremely disappointing 2006 season. They finished 7-6, and overall as a program, things weren't looking that good. They ended the season on a 4-game losing streak, and there just wasn't a lot of hope for the 2007 season. Dennis Dixon was going to be the starting quarterback, but just like his team, he had a very disappointing 2006 season. He threw more interceptions than touchdown passes, and on the year, only had a total of 14 touchdowns. Now, with Dennis Dixon back at the helm, as I mentioned, there weren't a lot of expectations. Oregon was unranked to begin the year. They were picked to finish middle of the pack in the Pac-10. Just to have another winning season would be considered a success. Before the season started, Oregon opted to go with Dennis Dixon to be their starting quarterback. Hopeful he'd be able to run the offense under brand new offensive coordinator Chip Kelly. The Ducks opened up the season at home, welcoming the Houston Cougars to town. It was a close game at half, with Oregon hanging on to a 20-17 lead. Then, in the second half, Dennis Dixon took over. He threw 2 passing touchdowns and put the dagger in the game with an 80-yard rushing touchdown. For the game, he threw for 134 yards with 2 touchdowns, with 141 yards on the ground with a rushing touchdown. The Cougars were a 10-win team the year prior, so it was an impressive win by Dixon and Oregon to begin the year. However, they'd have to recoup and travel on the road, where they take on the Michigan Wolverines in the Big House the following week. Now, the week prior to that game is when Michigan lost at home to Appalachian State. So the Wolverines were coming off an embarrassing loss, and they were looking forward to their next game. They wanted to make sure they could avenge that embarrassing loss the week prior. However, for the second straight week, Michigan was humiliated in their own stadium. Oregon fell behind 7-3, but they controlled the game the rest of the way, all thanks to Dennis Dixon. An 85-yard touchdown pass from Dixon to Brian Pasinger gave the Ducks the lead early on, and they wouldn't look back. With just under 4 minutes left in the second quarter, Dixon had what could have been his early Heisman moment. From the 9-yard line, he ran the fake Statue of Liberty and ran into the end zone for the rushing touchdown. Shortly after, Dixon threw a 61-yard strike to Derek Jones for the touchdown, giving Oregon a 32-7 lead at the half. Dixon had a 50-yard touchdown pass in the second half, helping guide the Ducks to a 39-7 win in the Big House. For the game, Dixon was 16 of 25 for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also added 76 yards and a touchdown on the ground. And just like that, the hype slowly began to build for Oregon and Dennis Dixon. They went from unranked to number 19 in the next AP poll. The following week, they played Fresno State at home, defeating them with ease. They won 52-21. Dennis Dixon finished the game with 150 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns, along with 60 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. The following week, Oregon jumped up yet again in the polls, moving up to number 13. They went on the road and defeated Stanford 55-31. Dennis Dixon had himself a career game as he threw for just under 400 yards with 4 touchdowns, all while completing 75% of his passes. He also had a rushing touchdown as well. Through the first month of the season, Oregon was 4-0, and they sat at number 11 in the AP poll. And Dennis Dixon was already one of the early favorites to win the Heisman Trophy. Oregon's perfect season came to an end the following week as they lost at home to the number 6 Cal California Golden Bears. The Ducks led 17-10 going into the fourth quarter, but a 21-3 scoring outburst from Cal gave them the win. Although they lost, Dennis Dixon still had a good game. He threw 300 yards while completing 70% of his passes and had 2 total touchdowns. The Ducks had a bye week, which featured a lot of chaos in the polls. Though they didn't play, Oregon actually moved up to number 9 in the rankings. They bounced back nicely with a 53-7 thrashing of Washington State. Dennis Dixon completed 21 of his 28 passes for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, while also adding a rushing touchdown. Another week, another 50-point outburst from the Oregon offense, as they defeated Washington on the road 55-34. Dixon threw for 200 yards and a touchdown, while rushing for 100 yards and a rushing touchdown. Oregon was now 6-1 and ranked number 5 in the country, though they had a tough task the following week as they would play the number 9 USC Trojans. The Ducks didn't score 50. In fact, they didn't even score half of that. It didn't matter because it was enough as they defeated USC 24-17. A 2-yard run from Dennis Dixon put the Ducks on the board first. It would be his only score of the game, but it was all that was needed from Oregon. Dixon finished the game with 150 passing yards and 75 rushing yards. Oregon then climbed up to number 4 in the polls, but yet again they had a tough matchup the following week as they would play the number 6 ranked Arizona State Sun Devils. The Ducks jumped out to an early lead as Dennis Dixon threw 3 touchdowns in the first 15 minutes of action, giving Oregon the 21-3 lead. They held on to the lead, winning the game 35-23. Dixon threw for 200 yards with 4 touchdowns, while also adding 60 yards on the ground. Oregon won, and Dixon looked great. However, Dixon did bang himself up a little bit at the end of the game, and this would slowly be the beginning of the downfall for the rest of the season. Now, Dixon tore a ligament in his left knee, but he asked the doctors and his head coach to pretty much keep it under wraps so no one else knew, because he wanted to try and play on it. An MRI the day after the Arizona State game revealed the tear, but the team decided that if Dixon could play on it okay in practice, and if he agreed to let the doctors know immediately if he felt instability, he could play in Thursday night's game against Arizona. Now, Dixon and his family, they knew what was going on, but like I said, Dixon wanted to play and try to help his team win. He said that he would elect to get surgery at the end of the season. Here's how former Oregon head coach Mike Bellotti described the situation going down. He had a partially torn ACL, but they weren't sure if he had done it earlier in his career. I said to him, "You're probably done," but he said, "No, coach, I want to play." No, I don't think that's going to be the case. He pleads his case with me and with Chip Kelly. He talked to the doctors and they said, let's see how it goes with practice. We come out in practice and he's wearing a brace on his knee and wins the conditioning drill, change of direction, and stop-start stuff. I asked the doctors, how is this possible? And they said, hey, there's a lot of people playing without an ACL. I'm still not comfortable. I still don't think I'm going to play him, he said. Please, coach, I want to play. Please let me play. I said, talk to your father, talk to your parents. We're not doing anything until you talk to your parents. We had conversations with them, the doctors cleared him, and the amazing thing was, he practiced that week as well as any time that year. Now, with the season on the line, it looked like the Oregon Ducks avoided a major scare. Dixon and Oregon would have to wait 12 days until their game at Arizona. He looked more than fine early on in the game. He rushed for a 39-yard touchdown on Oregon's first possession, but later in the first quarter, he caught his foot in the turf and stumbled badly. You knew immediately it wasn't good as Dixon laid on the grass, grabbing his knee. He was able to get up and walk off on his own power, but Dennis Dixon's season was over. He was one of the Heisman frontrunners after taking an unranked Oregon team and putting them in national championship consideration. On the season, Dixon had completed 68% of his passes for 2,100 yards, 20 passing touchdowns, and only 4 interceptions. He also ran for nearly 600 yards with 9 rushing touchdowns. The Ducks went on to lose the game 34-24, and any hopes they had of a national championship had officially come to an end. All it took was one play. One play to not only ruin any Heisman chances, but to ruin any national championship chances. After the loss, Oregon fell to number 9 in the polls, and they lost the following week on the road to UCLA 16-0, dropping to number 18 in the polls. And then they finished their season with a loss to Oregon State, falling out of the polls completely. So just like that, the Ducks went from being number 2 in the country, needing only 3 more wins to essentially be in the national championship, to being unranked and getting a spot in the Sun Bowl. Well, LSU, they went on to defeat Ohio State in the national championship, and Tim Tebow of Florida won the Heisman. But what if Dennis Dixon didn't tear his ACL? What if he finished the game at Arizona and Oregon won their final 3 games? So using What If Sports, I thought it'd be kind of fun to go and simulate those 3 potential games to see what the outcomes would have been and how Dixon would have fared. Now, obviously, these outcomes might be entirely different, but for the sake of this video, I thought it'd be interesting to go and simulate those games just to see what happens. After simulating the Oregon game, the Ducks defeated the Wildcats 44-14. Dennis Dixon completed 20 of 27 passes for 305 yards and 3 touchdowns while rushing for 65 yards and a touchdown. With the win, Oregon remains at number 2, and Dennis Dixon is still the Heisman frontrunner. The following week, the Ducks defeat the UCLA Bruins on the road 41-26, moving to 10-1 on the season and staying at number 2 in the country. Dixon completed 23 of 33 passes for 388 yards and 3 touchdowns, while also rushing for 59 yards and a touchdown. Heading into the final week of the season, the Ducks are essentially one win away from competing for the national championship, and Dennis Dixon is essentially one good game away from winning the Heisman. The Ducks defeated the Oregon State Beavers 55-31, finishing the season at 11-1 and being crowned the Pac-10 champions. Dennis Dixon goes nuts, completing 26 of 33 passes for 441 yards and 4 touchdowns. And for good measure, he added a rushing touchdown as well. For the season, adding the simulated stats, Dennis Dixon finishes with 3,200 passing yards, 30 passing touchdowns, and only 3 interceptions. He also adds 700 rushing yards and 11 rushing touchdowns as well. For comparison, Tim Tebow, who won the Heisman Trophy that year, finished the season with 3,100 yards to go along with 29 touchdowns and 6 interceptions prior to his bowl game. On the passing side, Dixon did beat Tebow, but Tebow did rush for 22 touchdowns with over 800 rushing yards. However, with Florida finishing the year 9-3 and Oregon finishing 11-1, I think the edge would have gone to Dennis Dixon. After having a 7-win Oregon team the year prior, Dennis Dixon, who probably no one had on any Heisman maps at all, led the Ducks to the national championship while putting up really good numbers, all while being just an average quarterback up to that season. So there's one answer. Had Dennis Dixon stayed healthy, he wins the 2007 Heisman Trophy and is the first player in Oregon Ducks history to ever win one. But instead, it goes to Tim Tebow. Now, what about the national championship? So for the championship game, Oregon would have taken on the Ohio State Buckeyes. So what happened? Well, the Ducks won pretty easily. They defeated the Buckeyes 55-23. How did Dennis Dixon do? He completed 20 of 28 passes for 231 yards and 4 touchdowns, while also adding 64 yards on the ground. So there you have it. Dennis Dixon becomes the first Heisman Trophy winner in program history, also leads the Oregon Ducks to their first national championship in program history. But because he tore his ACL in the first quarter against the Wildcats, we'll just never know. We'll truly never know how the college football landscape could have been forever changed had he just been healthy.